The distant reaches of the Outer Rim were a dangerous place, and not just because they were often poorly explored. For tens of millennia, the fringes of the galaxy were infamous for being a haven of criminals, of slavers, assassins, and above all, pirates. Space piracy was a thing in the Star Wars galaxy since before the Republic, and it would persist long after the Republic, Empire, New Republic, and so on had all crumbled into dust. Pirates were the eternal scourge of the Star Wars galaxy, and in this video, we'll be taking an exhaustive look at their history and how they worked.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
In a recent video, we talked about the stateless strategy, which involved warring factions in the Star Wars galaxy exploiting an unchangeable fact of civilization. Space is huge, and it's impossible to completely control large portions of it. Galactic governments may have laid claim to vast chunks of the galaxy, but in practice, they only control the scattering of inhabited planets and hyperspace routes across a much wider stretch of claimed territory. Belligerents pursuing the stateless strategy exploited this to hide large fleets in the depths of space, which the enemy would never be able to completely comb through, and then use them to carry out surgical strikes before retreating back into the unknown. As we discussed in that older video, this was a highly effective strategy that was hard to counter, and it wasn't just limited to belligerents in galactic scale wars. It was this same general phenomenon that made space piracy largely inevitable and impossible to eliminate through the use of force. In the Outer Rim especially, where regulations were lax and there were many shadow ports, it could be easier to become a pirate than it was to get a legitimate job. A small crew, some blasters, and a starship with some firepower was all you really needed. Pirate gangs could hide in the darkness between the stars, establishing secret bolt holes in unexplored, uninhabited places far from the known systems, and periodically attack ships, steal loot from them, and then retreat back to their hideouts before the authorities could arrive. Pirate gangs came in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and they used virtually every class of ship that could be acquired by private citizens. They went after all sorts of loot, from valuables to hostages, and their methods could differ greatly. The biggest difference between the methods of different pirate gangs was how they snared passing ships. Some would wait at the endpoints of hyperspace routes or in planetary atmospheres, use ion cannons to disable unlucky vessels, and then begin boarding, while other pirate gangs preferred to rip ships out of hyperspace mid-route, as jump points and planets were often patrolled by local authorities, while the empty space the routes cut across were not. Pirate gangs often did this by dragging chunks of ice out into the route, forcing ships to revert to real space to avoid a collision, after which they'd be disabled and boarded by the pirates. Once all was said and done, the pirates could then melt the ice with a volley from their laser cannons. Once a ship was disabled, regardless of the method, pirates would usually board it, often by hooking a docking umbilical cord up to an airlock or docking collar, and then blowing the doors. Other methods included using docking drills to puncture the hull, or sending boarders out in EVA suits to enter a ship through maintenance airlocks. Usually, pirates were out for profit, to steal things they could sell on the black market for a high price. Because of this, they were often involved with more organized criminal outfits, such as the Hutt Cartel, which bought their stolen goods and sometimes sponsored pirate gangs to attack their competitors. But pirates usually weren't beholden to any particular interests, and many gangs maintained a fierce independence from all would-be controlling interests. Nonetheless, pirate gangs regularly collaborated to establish shadow ports, lawless spaceports where pirates could stop for ship repairs and rest and relaxation without having to worry about the authorities. Shadow ports often acted as a neutral turf for different pirate groups, and they were spread far across the galaxy. Notorious examples included Socorro, Tatooine, Junkfoot Station, Borgo Prime, and Ord Mantell. Generally speaking, space pirates tended to have had hard upbringings that left them desperate. Many were unable to find legitimate work, were trapped in poverty, or had been orphans, and many were non-human due to the economic privilege humans tended to have under both the Republic and the Empire. While many pirates were cutthroats, little more than thieves and murderers, Many others were just doing what they needed to do to survive, and though they were often demonized by galactic governments, most pirates were much more complex people than the authorities gave them credit for. This raises an interesting issue that should be kept in mind as we dive into the history of space piracy. While the Republic's militarist faction and the rulers of the Empire argued that pirates were an ontologically evil existential threat that could only be dealt with through military force, the prevalence of piracy was really an outgrowth of the societal flaws of the Star Wars galaxy. It was the conditions that drove beings to piracy that were to blame for the scourge, and since those conditions were never truly addressed, piracy persisted in spite of all manner of military crackdowns and other tough-on-piracy policies the galactic governments attempted to enact. After all, one of the lessons of the stateless strategy was that you could never completely cleanse a region of space of hostile forces if they have no territory to defend. A lesson the states of the Star Wars galaxy seemingly never learned. We mentioned earlier that space piracy predated the Republic, but it isn't known how far back it existed. Certain pre-hyperdrive methods of FTL travel wouldn't have allowed for it like hyperdrives did, so it might not have been until the invention of hyperdrives that space piracy began to take off. At the very least, space piracy at least dates back to the early history of the Tionese cluster, where pirates were not only very common, but also powerful enough to claim noble titles and start empires. Tionese worlds like Stalamur and Argai were notorious for being pirate haunts, and in the most distant parts of the region, many local governments were essentially just legitimized pirate gangs. Most infamously, the Tionese cluster's two most renowned leaders were both originally pirates. Zur VIII, the Pirate King, who united most of the cluster under the Kingdom of Kron, and his son, Zim the Despot, who forged a massive empire that, for a brief period, was the largest in the galaxy. These two rulers were notorious for having retained something of the pirate ethos after becoming legitimate heads of state, and, as such, both were known for their ruthlessness and for how they plundered conquered worlds, taking vast hoards of treasure back to their vaults. Even after the time of Zur and Zim, the rulers of the Tionese cluster maintained a pirate-like spirit, and many systems continued to be run by semi-legitimized pirate lords. Tionese pirates were feared enemies of the Republic in its early history, especially when many pirate lords joined the Honorable Union of Decivero and Tion to embark on a war with the Republic, in which the Tionese hoped to seize the Republic's vast wealth for themselves. But this campaign failed, and the Tionese were ultimately conquered by the Republic, which eventually more or less brought an end to the scourge of Tionese pirates, thanks in part to Jedi assistance. But this was only the beginning of the Republic's long struggle against piracy on the Rim. The first 15,000 years of Republic history were defined by relatively rapid expansion across the galaxy, during which Republic scouts pushed the frontier of known space from the inner rim to the outer rim. Republic colonists were always pushing deeper into the unknown, looking for new resources and opportunities, and they were constantly menaced by pirates. Pirates, and other kinds of outlaws, were a constant menace along the frontier, and though Republic security forces were largely successful at driving them from the coreward regions, they were an inevitability in the more obscure reaches of the Republic. The Republic's expansion caused pirate territory to constantly relocate over the millennia, but eventually, the Outer Rim was solidified as the galaxy's pirate haven. This was because the Republic had opened the Mid and Outer Rims for settlement at the same time, knowing that the outlaws would gravitate to the more remote region and hopefully leave the Mid Rim open for legitimate settlers. Some of the pirates that harassed the Republic frontier in this time were your average independent gangs, but others were raiders hired by the Hutts to create a buffer zone around their territory, which Republic settlers were getting ever closer to. These pirates were the most vicious of all, and for millennia, the Jedi Knights and sector forces like the Belasco Free Volunteers fought an on and off turf war against these groups. These conflicts only ended when the border between Republic and Hutt territory was solidified after the end of the Pius Dea era. After this, the galactic frontier turned to other parts of the Rim. But there were pirates and raiders out there too, and the pirate threat never went away. During the final millennium of Republic history, in what was otherwise known as the Great Peace of the Republic reached its greatest territorial extent and the height of its prosperity, but even then, piracy was still a problem. In fact, it was the main problem for most of this era, a constant threat that played a major role in transforming the Republic into the Empire. The reason for this was simple. The prosperity the Republic enjoyed during this period was unevenly distributed. While the core worlds were living at large, much of the Outer Rim was sliding into poverty due to exploitative trade practices, which enriched the core at the cost of the Rim. This poverty led to a rise in piracy as many beings became desperate and did what they felt they had to survive. It also meant that the Republic was ill-equipped to defend systems from that piracy. After the Rusan Reformation, there was no centralized Republic military, and the local planetary security forces were generally underfunded and poorly equipped due to their home sector's poverty. The Jedi and judicial forces weren't numerous enough to intervene in every pirate-plagued sector, and this meant that in many places, piracy went more or less unchecked. This, of course, only pushed more people to turn to piracy to survive, as it was demonstrably effective. At first, the Trade Federation stepped in to offer sectors a solution to this problem, offering the services of their elite private paramilitary in crushing local pirate infestations in exchange for favorable trade deals with outlying systems. Many systems took this deal, but before long, these arrangements turned into a new form of oppression, wherein the Trade Federation practically took over sectors, even taking their votes in the Senate in exchange for protection services. Others in the Senate, most notably Randolph Tarkin and his militarist faction, vehemently argued that the only way to deal with the pirate threat was to recreate the centralized Republic military. No one, it should be noted, dared suggest the real solution, which was to end the exploitation of the Rim that was driving people to piracy in the first place. Tarkin and his militarists put a spotlight on the pirate threat, but they made it into a sort of euphemism. Most of them were closet humanocentrists, and a lot of what they wanted was just to clamp down on aliens whom they associated with piracy, as many pirate gangs were predominantly non-human. Nonetheless, the militarists won extensive support after crises like the Stark Hyperspace War, during which a pirate cartel known as the Stark Commercial Combine nearly crippled the Republic commercial fleet with a computer virus. The rise of the separatist movement meant that the militarists eventually got what they wanted, and just 3 short years later, the Republic became the Empire, an empire partly built on militarist ideology. The Empire professed that it would make it its mission to eradicate piracy all across the galaxy, and its territorial expansions deep into the Outer Rim were largely justified by that rhetoric. The Empire did fight pirates quite regularly. During the reconquest of the Rim, it humbled the Iska pirates and the Circadian pirates, for instance. All throughout the Imperial era, the Empire's bloated military waged a constant war against pirates and outlaws throughout the Outer Rim, but despite this, piracy was as bad under the Empire as it had been under the Republic, and in some cases, it got even worse. As we mentioned earlier, piracy was driven by the desperation of impoverished people on the galactic fringe, and the Empire deliberately impoverished many Rimmers, especially non-human ones, in order to enrich its warlords and the rulers of the core worlds. Thus, no matter how many pirate gangs the Empire utterly crushed, more would always arise to take their places. Some even took over Imperial Navy vessels, among them Crimson Jack's gang, which maintained a captured Star Destroyer. The Alliance to Restore the Republic, meanwhile, had a bit of a different relationship with pirates. It actually worked with many of them. Some of the more upstanding pirates, those who followed some sort of moral code and primarily targeted the wealthy and the Empire, were granted letters of marque by the Alliance and became privateers, harassing Imperial shipping in the name of the rebellion. Privateers were hardly a new phenomenon, but the rebels made more extensive use of their services than any other major galactic faction. This wasn't without controversy within Alliance ranks. Admiral Akbar, for one, was against the use of privateers from day one. Ironically, This actually played more of a role in reducing the threat of piracy than anything the Empire ever did. After the rise of the New Republic, many former rebel privateers went legit, and though the New Republic stopped the use of privateers, many former privateers enjoyed a reputation as heroes of the rebellion all the same. But even under the New Republic and its successors, the pirate threat persisted, and many people in the galaxy had resigned themselves to the seeming fact that it always would. That about wraps up the history of piracy in the Star Wars galaxy, but would be remiss if we didn't talk about a few of the more notable pirate gangs before ending this video. Some of the most notable pirate organizations weren't really organizations at all, but rather a bunch of different pirate gangs concentrated in a specific area that got associated in the minds of the galactic public. The infamous Mercen pirates, who spent centuries haunting the Inner Rim's Mercen system, were among these, as were the Pakuni pirates of the remote Pakuni sector. A more interesting example were the Blazing Claw gangs, a collection of hundreds of pirate groups that were unaffiliated but all used the same symbol, the sigil of the Blazing Claw. It's unknown where the Blazing Claw came from, but by the time of the Empire, it had been a thing for thousands of years, adopted by numerous pirate gangs over the millennia. It was partly popularized by Hollow films, which used the symbol of the Blazing Claw in the same way the skull and crossbones sees use in real-world media. Some of the infamous pirate groups, such as the Organization of Independent Traders and the Red Fury Brotherhood, were especially large, but others were just exceptionally daring. The most infamous was probably the Onaka Gang, a band of weakway pirates that prowled the Transhidian during the Clone Wars. Led by the charismatic Hondo Onaka, the members of the Onaka Gang weren't known for their intelligence, but they achieved galactic fame through a series of ridiculous stunts, among them kidnapping and attempting to ransom Count Dooku, Anakin Skywalker, and Obi-Wan Kenobi all at the same time. A similar example was the aforementioned Stark Commercial Combine, an alliance of pirate lords and corrupt businessmen that spearheaded a conspiracy with Trade Federation leadership to cripple the Republic. The Stark Combine was fairly short-lived, but it left a lasting impact on the galaxy by starting the Stark Hyperspace War. Some pirates were especially well known for having specific methods. During the Separatist Crisis, the pirates of Iridium somehow got their hands on rare power gems that they could use to strip starships of their shields, making them easy targets. This allowed these pirates to carry out a string of successful, high-profile attacks before they were crushed by the Jedi, who were too cool for shields anyway. A generation later, another group of pirates, the Norrelak Freebooters, became infamous not for their methods, but for regularly attacking the same target, the agricultural planet Tanab. The Freebooters' raids were only stopped thanks to the ingenuity of Lando Calrissian, who happened to be in the system during one raid and took command of the local defense fleet, helping them outwit and defeat the pirates once and for all. Another band of pirates known for their choice of targets was the Laurel Raiders, who regularly attacked ships traveling along the Plemian trade route and became infamous for taking any human women they found aboard target vessels prisoner. They took these women to their fortress, the planet Hapes, in the depths of the Hapes cluster, where they were trapped for generations before the Jedi Knights wiped out the Laurel Raiders in around 3000 BBY. Their former prisoners ended up founding the aggressively matriarchal Hapes Consortium, which took the pirates' stronghold as their capital. But perhaps the most fascinating pirate gang was the Lok Revenants, known informally among the Jedi as Adi Gallia's pirate friends. The Lok Revenants were led by a fearsome captain named Nim, who was one of those Robin Hood type pirates who only went after the wealthy and corrupt, especially the Trade Federation. After the Trade Federation occupied the Karthak system, which contained Lok and the planet Maromir, the Lok Revenants became a resistance group fighting against the occupation, alongside the Mir Resistance and other insurgents. Just before the start of the Clone Wars, Nim and his followers allied with Adi Gallia to drive the Trade Federation from the system, and once that was accomplished, the Lok Revenants ended up playing a key role in the Battle of Geonosis, in which they helped Adi Gallia and Republic naval forces win the orbital theater of the battle. Nim and Adi Gallia remained friends after this, and Gallia would periodically work with the Lok Revenants throughout the Clone Wars, enlisting their services as privateers against the Trade Federation. All told, pirates have been a staple of Star Wars storytelling since Crimson Jack made his first appearance in the old Marvel comic series from the 70s, and they continue to be prominent in Star Wars media today, including in the latest Star Wars series, Skeleton Crew. This series introduces yet another pirate gang, Silvo's Pirates, a vicious group that's bold enough to attack New Republic ships, and there's doubtless going to be much more pirate activity as this series continues. Skeleton Crew is surprisingly good, at least in our opinion. It's a fun time, and it's certainly better than we were expecting. We look forward to seeing more pirate content as this series goes on. So that's our look at the history and methodology of space piracy in Star Wars. But what do you think? Would you like to see more pirate content in Star Wars going forward? What do you think of Skeleton Crew so far? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, because we always love to read them. As always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.